Okay, so we're looking at retail sales for February, and it looks like a little bit of a bounce back, 0.2%. But after January's numbers got revised, down to minus 1.2%, that doesn't look quite as impressive anymore. Kind of, most of them were thinking we'd see a bigger jump, maybe 0.5% to 0.75%. And year over year, we were up 3.1%. But the headline numbers never tell the whole story, do they? So let's dig in and see what's really going on. Where are people spending? Where are they cutting back? And what does it all mean? All right, so let's just start with the big picture here. That 0.2% rise is pretty weak, right? And there's some big factors pulling it down. Like gas stations down 1%, probably because gas prices have been dropping. And then the car industry took a bit of the hit too. Auto sales and parts down sort of 0.4%. But here's the interesting thing. You take out those two, gas and cars, and suddenly retail spending looks a lot healthier, up 0.5%. So it really makes you think, maybe people are being more careful with their money and focusing on certain things. And remember, January was worse than we initially thought. So maybe February isn't that bad in comparison. Plus, a lot of retailers were saying things were slow at the start of February. Cold weather, late tax refunds, that kind of stuff made people hesitate a little. So where were people actually spending more in February? Well, e-commerce was a big winner here. Non-store retailers, they jumped up a lot, being 2.4%, just because of showing online shopping is here to stay. Health and personal care stores at pretty well too, up 1.7%. People are focusing more on, feeling good, or maybe it's just necessities, but they're spending there. Grocery stores have a decent bump, 2.4% up, so people are still buying food and drinks. And building material sales also went up, so it seems like people are still investing in their homes, fixing things up. All in all, it kind of looks like people are sticking to the essentials, being careful with those fun purchases. Now, on the flip side, there were some places where spending really dropped. Department stores, they're down 1.7%. Restaurants, bars, they took a hit too, down 1.5%. And clothing stores down 0.6%. So basically, people are cutting back on things they don't absolutely need, clothes going out. And like we said before, gas stations and cars and car parts also saw less spending. So it's really interesting to see those two trends side by side. You're buying more necessities and less of the fun stuff. What does that tell us about how people are feeling? Let's start with the economy in general and how people are feeling about it. A lot of folks are saying that those tariffs and possibility of government jobs being cut are making people nervous. Economists are worried that tariffs will make prices go up, inflation, and that could slow the whole economy down. Plus, the government keeps changing its mind on economic policies, and that makes it hard for people to claim in this ask. They're not sure what's coming next. So even though people haven't been feeling great about the economy for a few months now, we haven't seen a huge drop in spending yet, at least not through February. But there is some data that's giving us costs. Bank of America, they track how much people are spending using credit and debit cards. And their numbers show spending actually went down year over year in February, which is different from January when it went up. So maybe it depends on whose data you're looking at. Now, here's the big thing. You got to remember consumer spending. That's a huge driver of how well our whole economy does. So if people start spending less, that's a red flag. It could mean the economy is heading for trouble. One economist from Citi, he said these monthly retail sales numbers could be all over the place. You got to look at the big picture, the average over a few months to really see a trend. And speaking of trends, there's this thing called the control group retail sales. And it tells a pretty interesting story. This group doesn't include things like gas and restaurants, those things that jump up and down all the time. And this control group actually went up 1%, which is better than anyone expected. And this group is important because it directly affects those GDP calculations, the big measure of how our county is doing. So maybe things aren't as bad as that initial headline number made it seem. And there's another economist from a Navy Federal Credit Union, and he said something really interesting. He said, even though people are feeling kind of gloomy about the economy, they're still spending money. And the main reason for that is because incomes are going up. Plus, when you look at the total retail sales, they're up 3.1% compared to last year. And that's actually more than inflation, which is 2.8% according to the CPI. So people are actually spending more, even when you take rising prices into account. Now, if we look at other economic indicators, well, the Atlanta Fed's GDPA, now that's forecasting that the economy might actually shrink in the first quarter, but that could change, those strong control sales numbers could bump things up. But then there's the New York Fed's factory activity measure, and that dropped a lot in March, so that's not great news. And one more thing, it's important to remember, those retail sales numbers we've been talking about, they don't take inflation into account. And prices went up 0.2% in February. So that means, when you adjust for inflation, the increase in spending pretty much just cancels out. So let's recap what we learned today about retail sales in February. We saw a little bit of a rebound, but not as much as people were hoping for. And when you look deeper, there are some bright spots, things like e-commerce, health, and personal care, and groceries. They're all doing well. But then there are areas where people are clearly pulling back, like department stores, restaurants, and clothes. So people are feeling less confident about the economy, but they're still spending money, especially on things they need. But some signs are pointing to people becoming more cautious. So here's something to think about. We've seen this shift towards buying more essentials and less fun stuff. So what does that tell us about what's important to people right now? And what do you think it means for the economy going forward? How will people balance those needs versus those wants? Well, will they prioritize, and how will that all play out? This stuff is something to keep an eye on. If you found this deep dive helpful, please get a like and subscribe for more in-depth analysis. We'll be back soon with more economic trends to explore. Until then, take care.